Ladies and gentlemen, when you go silent, he notices, and in that quiet, his mind starts running. Not a jog, not a walk, a full-on sprint. He's filling in blanks with stories that may not be true, but they feel true to him. And the tricky part, the longer you stay quiet, the louder those stories get. So let's walk through exactly what's going on in his head, day by day, and why it matters. You know what happens first when you go silent? His mind doesn't leap to, oh, she must just be busy. No, his mind is wired for connection with you. So the first thing he does is rewind, like actually mentally rewind the tape of your last interaction. He's asking himself, did I miss something? Was there a tone in her voice? Did she pause before she said goodbye? Did I say something I thought was fine, but maybe landed wrong? And here's the thing, it's not always conscious. Sometimes it's just a gut level tension. You know that feeling you get when someone you care about feels distant? That little knot that sits right under your ribs? He gets that too. Only instead of sitting with it, he starts playing detective. He's replaying the last conversation in his head like it's a crime scene, scanning for clues. And in that process, he starts assuming that if something is wrong, it's probably his fault. Now, that doesn't mean he's automatically going to say, hey, did I do something? Most men, especially if they don't feel totally safe in that emotional space, will hesitate. They're not sure if asking will make it better or make it worse. So they stay quiet, but inside the self-question is loud. You might think, well, if he's unsure, why doesn't he just ask? That's the tricky part. He's weighing the risk. He's thinking if she's upset and I bring it up, am I opening a bigger can of worms? Or maybe she's not upset and I'll look insecure. So instead of checking in, he tries to read between the lines. And the silence you're giving, he interprets it as a sign, maybe faint, maybe glaring, that something is off. And here's where it starts to get complicated. His brain doesn't just stop at, did I do something wrong? It starts wandering to what exactly it could be. Sometimes the scenarios are small and logical, like maybe she didn't like how I ended that call. But other times his mind jumps to bigger, more emotional conclusions, things that might have nothing to do with reality. And once his brain starts making up stories, they're hard to undo. Think about it like this. When there's no clear explanation, the mind fills in the gaps. And it almost never fills them with the most positive, generous possibility. Why? Because the human brain is built to notice threats, not ignore them. Silence feels like a potential threat to the relationship. So he focuses there. Sometimes he even starts changing his behavior without you realizing it. Maybe he texts you a little more carefully, watching his words. Maybe he becomes slightly more formal or polite. That's him trying to do better, even though he doesn't actually know what the problem is. And ironically, that shift can make the whole dynamic feel different. Now, here's the reality. Not every silence is punishment. Sometimes you just need space. But here's what's important to understand. On his end, silence is not neutral. It's not just an empty space. It's a mirror, and he's looking into it. But instead of seeing a clear reflection, he's seeing all his possible mistakes staring back at him. And when he's in that day one space, when he's just starting to wonder, a small one, there's still a window. That's the moment where clarity is easiest. That's when a single honest text, a quick, hey, I'm just processing some things. Nothing you did wrong can calm the storm before it even starts. Because once the guessing game begins, once the stories start building in his head, the silence starts to feel heavier. And it's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about preventing the distance that grows when someone feels like they're already on the wrong side of the line, and they don't even know how they got there. Day one is when he's still hopeful, still open, still searching for reassurance. By day 3 or 4, he's not searching anymore. He's protecting himself. So if there's one thing to take from this first stage, it's this silence can be a seed. On day 1, it's small, maybe even harmless. But the soil it's planted in, his own insecurities, fears, and experiences, can make it grow into something you didn't intend. And once it grows, it's a lot harder to pull out by the roots. That's why day 1 matters most, because it's the day his mind starts writing a story, and you still have the power to help shape the ending. By day 2, the silence isn't just silence anymore. It's starting to take shape. He's moved past that first round of, did I do something wrong? And now he's in the stage where the guessing game kicks into overdrive. This is the point where the blank space between you two becomes a movie screen, and he starts projecting all kinds of scenarios on it. The tricky thing about the human brain is it doesn't like unanswered questions. It's uncomfortable with the unknown. So it makes things up to fill the gap. And when the gap is emotional, especially in a relationship, those made-up stories are rarely happy ones. His mind starts reaching for the most emotionally charged possibilities because those feel the most urgent to resolve. He might think, maybe she's still upset about what I said last week. Then 5 minutes later, what is she mad about? Something I don't even remember. Then, or is it not even about me? Maybe she's talking to someone else. Maybe she's done. Maybe she's pulling away. And notice how quickly the jump happens from small, almost reasonable thoughts to big relationship-shaking possibilities. That's how silence works. When you care about someone, it leaves too much open space for fear to move in. Here's where it starts getting even more layered. If he's been in relationships before where silence meant punishment, rejection, or the beginning of the end, those old experiences get pulled into the present. He's not just reacting to your silence. He's reacting to every silence he's felt before. That's why by day 2, the energy shifts. He's not simply curious anymore. He's bracing himself. And bracing changes how he shows up with you. He may start being shorter in his replies because he doesn't want to mess up while you're quiet. He might start holding back things he would normally share because vulnerability feels risky when he's not sure where he stands. That's the irony. His attempt to protect himself from what he thinks is coming can actually create more distance between you. Here's something to understand about how the mind works in this stage. Assumptions feel like answers. Even if they're wrong, they give the brain a sense of closure. And closure, whether real or fake, feels safer than confusion. So if he assumes she's probably mad because I didn't help with that thing yesterday, he might start acting as though that's true, even if it isn't. He'll adjust his tone, maybe overcompensate, maybe pull back, and you on your side start feeling his change. And now there's a feedback loop that makes the silence even heavier. If you've ever had someone treat you differently for a reason you didn't understand, you know how weird it feels. That's exactly what can happen here. By day 2, you might notice him seeming more guarded or distant, and from your perspective, it feels like he's the one creating the tension. But from his perspective, he's just responding to what he thinks is already true. This is also the point where worst-case scenarios start to settle in. He might not tell you outright, but he's playing out imaginary conversations in his head, how you'll respond, what he'll say, how it might all end. And the problem is, once those scenarios get too detailed, they start to feel real. You've probably experienced that yourself, where you imagined a conflict so vividly that your body actually reacted to it. That's the same process happening here. What makes this stage dangerous is how quickly it snowballs. One assumption fuels another, and before long the story in his head has so many details that it feels like a fact. And the more true it feels to him, the more his emotions start responding to it. So he's not just worried anymore, he's frustrated or hurt or resigned. And remember, this is only day 2. This is early, but this is where silence starts to gain weight. It's no longer just the absence of words. It's the presence of meaning. Meaning that may not even exist outside of his imagination. That's why I always say silence doesn't just sit there quietly. It's active, it's busy, it's planting seeds in his mind, watering them with every hour that passes. And by the time you break it, those seeds might have already grown into something that's hard to untangle. Because once the story in his head feels more real than the actual story between you, you're no longer having one conversation. You're having two, the one in reality and the one he's been living in for the past 2 days. And closing that gap is a lot harder than keeping it from opening in the first place. By day 3, something shifts. The confusion from day 1 and the guessing from day 2 start turning into a plan. Except it's not the kind of plan you'd want. This is the point where he stops searching for answers and starts building defenses. It's not that he's given up on the relationship, but he's decided he can't sit in uncertainty forever. So instead of trying to bridge the gap, he starts protecting himself from what he thinks is coming. In his mind, the silence isn't just random anymore. It's intentional. Whether or not that's true, that's how it feels to him. And when something feels intentional, the natural instinct is to respond in kind. If you're pulling away, maybe he should pull away too. If you're withholding, maybe he should withhold too. He might not say that out loud, but it shows in the little things, the shorter replies, the lack of warmth, the way he stops initiating as much. Here's the thing. Defense mode is tricky because it often feels justified. If he's convinced that your silence means you're upset, disappointed, or maybe even done, then protecting his own feelings starts to look like the smart move. But protection comes at a cost. You can't protect yourself and fully connect at the same time. One cancels out the other. And this is where the silent standoff begins. On your side, you might be thinking, why is he acting cold? Why does he seem less engaged? On his side, he's thinking she's upset, so I'm not going to give her more ammo to use against me. Both of you are reacting to each other, but neither of you is reacting to the actual truth. You're reacting to assumptions, and those assumptions keep you in separate corners. By day 3, his energy is no longer open and curious. It's guarded. He's already decided that asking what's wrong might backfire. So instead, he starts rewriting the rules of interaction. He keeps conversations surface level. He's careful not to say too much. He may even start mirroring your silence, thinking, if she's not talking, I'm not talking. And if that sounds a little like a stalemate, that's exactly what it is. It's important to understand defense mode isn't just about avoiding pain. It's also about control. When someone feels like they don't know what's happening, they look for any way to regain a sense of power in the situation for him. That might mean acting like the silence doesn't bother him. Even if it does, it might mean convincing himself he doesn't need to resolve it, even if he wants to. And the more he convinces himself of that, the less likely he is to reach back out first. Another thing that happens here, his mind starts collecting evidence to support his view. Maybe you didn't respond to a message right away, and in his head, that's proof that you're still upset. Maybe you didn't sound as cheerful on the phone, and that's more proof. Even neutral actions can start looking negative when someone's in a defensive state. And the more proof he collects, the stronger his wall becomes. This stage is dangerous because it feels safer for him than the first two. Day 1 and day 2 are uncomfortable. He's confused. He's anxious. He's restless. But day 3, he's taken some of that uncertainty and turned it into resolve. It's not the kind of resolve that fixes things, but it's the kind that convinces him he's protecting himself. And that can make him harder to reach from your perspective. This might be the first day where you really feel the silence start to double back at you. It's not just you holding back anymore. It's him too. And when both people are holding back, communication doesn't just slow down. It starts to dry up. By this point, even if you do decide to break the silence, you might feel a difference in his response. He may still be polite, still be engaged on the surface, but there's a layer missing. That layer is trust. Not trust in you as a person necessarily, but trust in the space between you. Trust that he can be open without getting hurt. And the reality is, the longer defense mode stays in place, the harder it is to bring down. Because defense mode has one job: to keep things out. And unfortunately, it doesn't know how to tell the difference between what will hurt and what will heal. It blocks them both. By day 3, the silence is no longer just a gap in the conversation. It's a wall he's actively building. And if you don't catch it here, that wall is only going to get higher. By day 4, the silence has a different flavor. The initial confusion is gone. The guesses have already been made. The defenses are up, and now it's starting to turn into something heavier. Resentment, not always explosive, not always obvious, but it's there. At this point, he's not just thinking, what did I do wrong? He's thinking, why is she doing this? It's no longer about the action that might have caused the silence. It's about the silence itself. And the more he focuses on that, the more it starts to feel unfair. See, worry and confusion make people want answers. Resentment makes them want distance. And when you get to this stage, The silence isn't just a mystery to solve, it's an offense to respond to. Even if you didn't mean it that way by now, that's how it's landing. Here's the thing about resentment. It feeds on interpretation. He's interpreting your quiet as intentional, as deliberate, and the longer it goes, the more convinced he becomes that you're doing it on purpose. And if he's convinced you're doing it on purpose, he'll start to see it as a power move. Nobody likes to feel controlled. And when someone feels like you're controlling the connection, the instinct is to pull even harder in the opposite direction. This is the day where you might see him start to lean into his independence. Not in a healthy, I'm good on my own way, but in a fine, if you're going to be distant, I'll show you I don't need you way. He might start giving his attention to work, friends, hobbies, anything that reinforces the feeling that he's not dependent on you for stability. And here's the irony underneath that move toward independence. There's still care. People don't get resentful about things they don't care about. If he didn't value your connection, your silence wouldn't have any weight at all. But instead of showing that care directly, resentment makes him channel it into self-protection. He might stop reaching out altogether. He might match your silence, not just in conversation, but in emotion. If you seem guarded, he'll seem guarded. If you seem distant, he'll get more distant. At this point, it's not about solving the problem. It's about making sure he's not the only one feeling the sting of it. And this is where the unspoken rules start to form. He's creating new lines in his head, new limits. Even if he doesn't tell you about them, he's deciding what he will and won't share, how much energy he will and won't give. And the danger is that those lines don't just disappear when the silence ends. They can stick around. They can quietly shape the way he interacts with you going forward, long after you've moved on from whatever started this in the first place. If you were to break the silence on day 4, you might notice that he doesn't come back to you the same way he would have on day 1 or 2. You might be polite. You might engage, but there's a hesitation there. A part of him is holding back, not because he wants to punish you, but because resentment has convinced him that being fully open isn't safe right now. And that's the thing. Resentment doesn't just close the door. It locks it from the inside. Once it's there, it starts to color how every new interaction feels. You could be having a perfectly normal conversation, but in his mind, there's still this unresolved layer underneath. A little voice that says, remember what happened last time? By day 4, he's not thinking about how to fix it. He's thinking about how not to get stuck in this spot again. That's a very different mindset, and it changes the whole dynamic. You're no longer working together to reconnect. You're each working separately to protect yourselves. And that's when relationships start to feel like a game of chess instead of a partnership. Once resentment takes root, it's not impossible to undo, but it is harder because now you're not just repairing communication, you're rebuilding trust in the safety of that communication, and trust takes longer to restore than it does to lose. By this point, the silence has stopped being about the original reason and has started being about the silence itself. And that's when it becomes the most dangerous. By day 5, something subtle but serious has happened. The energy has shifted again, but this time it's not confusion, not guessing, not defense, not even resentment. It's detachment. And detachment is quiet in a way that feels different from silence. Silence still has tension in it. Detachment is when the tension starts to fade, not because things are better, but because he's stopped holding on to them the same way. At this point, he's not pacing mentally anymore, not running through scenarios, not rehearsing conversations in his head. Instead, he's letting go of the expectation that the connection will feel like it did before. And when that happens, the emotional cord between you starts to loosen. Not always in an obvious, dramatic way, but enough that the bond starts to feel thinner. Here's the difference. In the earlier days, he cared enough to overthink. Now he's conserving his energy. Instead of wondering why you're silent, he starts accepting it as the new normal. And that's the dangerous part, because once someone accepts distance as normal, it's a lot harder to convince them to come back close again. You might notice little changes here. He's slower to respond, but not in a way that feels pointed. He might share less, not because he's guarding himself against you anymore, but because he's simply redirected that sharing elsewhere to friends, coworkers, hobbies, even just to himself. The space between you doesn't feel charged anymore. It feels empty. On the surface, detachment can look calm, but underneath it's a sign that he's emotionally packing his bags. They might not be walking out the door, but he's starting to take pieces of himself with him. His excitement to talk to you, his eagerness to share little details, his willingness to be vulnerable. It's like he's moving parts of the relationship into storage. Not gone, but not within reach either. And here's what makes this stage so tricky. Once detachment sets in, it doesn't feel as urgent to fix things. For him, the silence isn't painful anymore. It's just there. That lack of pain might sound like relief, but it's actually a warning sign. It means the connection isn't tugging at him the way it used to. It means the stakes feel lower. And in relationships, when the stakes start to feel low, effort starts to fade. If you've ever had a friendship or relationship drift apart, you know what this looks like. There's no big fight, no dramatic ending, just less and less connection, until it's hard to remember what it felt like when you were close. Day 5 is the beginning of that drift. Not because he stopped caring entirely, but because caring has started to cost more energy than it feels like it's worth. The other danger here is that detachment can be mistaken for maturity or patience. From the outside, it might look like he's just giving you space. And in a way he is, but not with the intention of coming back to the same closeness. He's giving space in the same way people give space to things they've decided not to depend on anymore. By now, if you were to break the silence, you might notice that the conversation feels flat, not hostile, not cold, just flat. The warmth is missing, the quickness to laugh, the ease of talking, the spark that made your connection feel alive. That's what starts to fade in this stage. And the hardest part, once that warmth is gone, you can't just turn it back on with one good conversation. You have to rebuild it, and that takes more time than most people expect. Day 5 isn't always the end of a relationship, but it can be the turning point where the relationship starts to operate at a lower temperature, less passion, less urgency, less depth. It's when the connection shifts from being something he's actively nurturing to something he's passively letting happen, if it happens at all. The truth is, most relationships can survive silence for a day or two, even 3. But by day 5, the silence isn't just a pause, it's a pattern, and patterns have a way of sticking, especially once the emotional cost of breaking them feels higher than the benefit of doing so. By this point, the question in his mind isn't what's wrong, it's do I want to put the energy back in? And if the answer isn't an immediate yes, then the silence hasn't just taken space in your conversations, it's taken space in the relationship itself. So here's the reality. When you go silent, it's not just nothing happening. Something is happening. Every day that passes, the meaning of that silence changes in his mind. Day 1, it's questions. Day 2, it's assumptions. Day 3, it's defense. Day 4, it's resentment. And day 5 of that's detachment. Silence is powerful, but it's also risky. It can protect you. Yes, but it can also build a wall so high that by the time you're ready to climb down, the other person has already walked away. And sometimes they don't slam the door when they leave. They just take a step back, then another, until you turn around and realize the space between you is too wide to cross. If connection matters to you, catch it early, because the longer you wait, the more the silence starts to speak for you.